Someone must watch the dog. My father laughed when he said it, then handed me a $15 tent while my sister packed for a 21-day luxury cruise. I was 27. They didn't ask. They told me I was staying. My godfather watched them drive away from the doorway, and I saw his brow pulled tight in a way I'd never seen before. 21 days, $15. I didn't cry on that driveway. I made a phone call. 3 weeks later, my parents pulled up to a house they couldn't get into. I was standing on the porch with a lawyer holding one document my father had signed 11 years ago and never read past the title page. My father screamed for the police. Then he read the first line. The neighbor across the street watched him sit down on his own front step. My mother grabbed my sister's arm. The lawyer folded the document back into his briefcase like he'd done this 100 times. Before I go on, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now let me take you back to the night my godfather called and said, "I need you to come see something your father signed." My name is Alina. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've lived in a house I bought with my own money while my parents told the neighbors they were doing me a favor by letting me sleep under their roof. In my family, there is one law. Chloe gets the light and I provide the fuel. 4 years ago, my father's construction business didn't just fail, it cratered. He'd spent decades building custom decks and additions, but he never learned how to manage a spreadsheet. When the bank started sending letters in bright red envelopes, he didn't tell my mother. He just stopped opening the mail. I found the foreclosure notice in the recycling bin. I was 27 then, working 60-hour weeks as a junior accountant, living in a studio apartment that smelled like old radiator steam and bleach. I had $80,000 saved, every cent of a small inheritance from my grandmother, and 4 years of aggressive, bone-deep frugality. I could have let them lose it. I could have watched the moving trucks pull up to 412 Maple Drive and felt nothing but the wind. But I saw my father sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cold cup of coffee, looking like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. So I made a deal with a blind LLC. I bought the house from the bank. I kept my name off the public records to protect my father's pride. In the family narrative, a generous anonymous investor had stepped in to lease the house back to them. I was the one who signed the mortgage checks every month. I was the one who made sure the property taxes were paid. But my parents didn't know that. Or rather, they chose to believe the lie they told the world. They told everyone they had refinanced through a private group, and that I, the struggling daughter, had moved back home because I couldn't cut it on my own. "It's good for her," my mother told her bridge club while I was in the kitchen washing their lunch plates. "She needs the structure. We only charge her a small lodging fee to help her learn responsibility." That lodging fee was $1,200 a month. I paid it on top of the mortgage I was secretly covering. I watched my mother take my check and immediately Venmo the exact amount to my younger sister, Chloe, for her travel expenses. Chloe is 24 and has never held a job that required her to wear a name tag. She's an aspiring travel creator, which is a fancy way of saying she spends my mortgage payments on boutique hotels in Chelum and linen sets from brands I can't pronounce. The system was simple. I worked. I paid. I stayed invisible. One Tuesday afternoon, I was pulling into the driveway after a 9-hour day of auditing payroll. I saw my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, standing by his mailbox. He's 74, a retired developer who sold my father this lot 30 years ago. He's the only one who knows the truth about the deed. He waved me over. His face was grave. "Elena," he said, leaning on the fence. "I saw your mother out here this morning with a man in a yellow vest, a contractor." She was showing him the property line back by the old oak, said something about clearing the view for the new suite. My stomach tightened. A new suite. That's what she called it. You might want to check the mail, honey. I thanked him and walked inside. The house smelled like expensive candles and rosemary chicken. My mother was at the mahogany dining table, a table I'd paid the movers to keep during the refinance, flipping through a glossy cruise brochure. "Move your car, Alina," she said without looking up. "Chloe's new boyfriend is coming over for dinner. He drives a dually and he needs the whole driveway. You can park on the street." "I have groceries in the trunk, Mom," I said. "Then carry them farther. It's good for your heart." My father was in the living room, his feet up on the recliner, watching the news. He didn't look at me. He never did when my mother was in one of her managing moods. He just adjusted the volume on the TV. I walked to the kitchen and saw 6 designer moving boxes stacked against the pantry. They weren't empty. I could see the edges of Chloe's silk dresses peeking out. "Why is Chloe packing?" I asked. My mother finally looked at me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of someone who had already won a game I didn't know we were playing. "She isn't packing for the cruise, Alina," my mother said, tapping the brochure. "She's packing to move in. Permanently. We've decided the house is a bit too crowded with you taking up the master suite. It's time for a change." I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. I thought about the $1,200 I'd handed her yesterday. I thought about the mortgage payment I'd scheduled this morning. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. My mother picked up a pen and circled a 21-day Mediterranean itinerary. "Someone has to watch the dog while we're on the cruise next month," she said. "And after that?" "Well, Chloe needs a dedicated space for her studio. You're an accountant, Alina. I'm sure you can find a way to make the numbers work somewhere else." I looked at my father. He stared at the television. He wouldn't catch my eye. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just went to my room, the master suite I'd chosen because I was the one paying for the roof, and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and realized that for 4 years, I hadn't been a daughter. I'd been a silent partner in my own dispossession. I pulled out my phone and called the one person who could help me burn the bridge I'd spent my life building. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the red numbers on my alarm clock bleed into the darkness. By 6:00 a.m., I knew I couldn't stay in this room and pretend the walls weren't closing in. I put on my gray wool suit, the one I wear for difficult audits, and carried my laptop bag down to the kitchen. The smell of expensive coffee was already thick in the air. My mother was standing at the island, her iPad propped up against a bowl of lemons. She was wearing her silk robe, the one Chloe bought her with my lodging fee money last Christmas. She didn't look up when I walked in. She just slid a piece of neon pink paper across the granite. "What's this?" I asked, though the bold lettering at the top was already screaming at me. "A 30-day notice," she said, her voice as casual as if she were handing me a recipe. "We're making it official, Alina. We don't want any misunderstandings later on. You've had a good run here, but Chloe needs to get her life started, and she can't do that while she's cramped in that guest room." I picked up the paper. Notice to quit. It was a standard form she'd clearly printed from the internet. My mother had filled in the blanks in her perfect, loopy cursive. "Mom, I pay $1,200 a month," I said, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. "On top of that, I cover the utilities, I pay for the landscaping. I bought the new water heater last winter when yours blew. You can't just hand me a pink slip like I'm a stranger." "Actually," a voice chirped from the doorway. Chloe walked in, wearing a matching lounge set and holding her phone on a gimbal. She was recording. She always seemed to be recording lately, turning our lives into content for people who like to watch girls pretend to be rich. "Actually, Chloe said, flashing a bright, camera-ready smile at the lens before looking at me. "Mom and Dad are the homeowners, and as homeowners, they have the right to choose who lives in their primary residence. We've already looked up the laws. Since you don't have a formal lease, you're just a guest who's overstayed her welcome." She turned the camera toward me, capturing my tired face, my messy hair, and the pink paper in my hand. "My sister is being so dramatic about moving out," Chloe whispered to her followers. "Like literally she's 31. It's time to fly the nest, babe." I looked at my mother. "Are you really going to let her film this?" "Don't be sensitive, Alina," my mother said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were hard. "The truth is, your fee barely covers the wear and tear you put on this house. The real cost of living here is much higher. We've been subsidizing your life for 4 years and we're tired of it. Chloe is going to use the master suite as a creative hub. She has a real career ahead of her. She needs the space to grow." "A creative hub?" I asked. "She posts videos of herself unboxing makeup I pay for." "That's enough," my father's voice boomed. He walked into the kitchen, already dressed in his work flannel, though he hadn't been to a job site in months. He wouldn't look at me. He headed straight for the coffee pot. "Your mother made her decision. I support her. We need the house to feel like a home again, not a boarding house for an ungrateful daughter who thinks she owns the place because she writes a few checks." The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. I thought about the LLC bank account. I thought about the 4 years of mortgage payments that had kept the bank from putting a lock on that very front door. "I pay the bulk of the expenses for this entire household, Dad," I said. "If I leave, who's going to pay the anonymous investor every month? Who's going to keep the lights on?" My mother let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "The real landlord is a professional group, Alina. I've already spoken to our contact there. They're very understanding of our family situation. They know we're the ones who really care for this property. We'll manage just fine without your pittance." She'd spoken to the contact. The contact was a shell email address that went directly to my phone. I hadn't received a single message. She was lying to my face, creating a reality where I was a burden and they were the masters of their domain. 30 days, my mother repeated, tapping the pink paper. "And Alina, I'd start packing tonight. Chloe wants to start painting the master suite on Friday. She's going with a sunset terracotta theme. It's going to be beautiful." Chloe giggled and panned her camera around the kitchen. Manifesting a new beginning, out with the old energy, in with the aesthetic. I looked at the three of them, my mother's cold ambition, my sister's shallow vanity, and my father's cowardice. They were standing in a house I had saved, eating food I had bought, planning a future on my dime, while handing me a piece of paper that told me I didn't belong. "Fine," I said. I folded the pink paper once, twice, and tucked it into my blazer pocket. 30 days. I walked out the door without another word. As I reached my car, I heard Chloe's voice drift through the open kitchen window. "Did you get the shot, Mom? The look on her face was literally priceless. That's going to get so many views." I sat in my car, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't drive to work. I drove 2 blocks over and pulled into the driveway of a small, white house with a perfectly manicured lawn. I knocked on Mr. Henderson's door. When he opened it, holding a watering can, I didn't say hello. "They gave me an eviction notice, George," I said. He looked at me, then looked at the suit I was wearing. He set the watering can down. "Well," he said softly, "I suppose it's time we stop pretending then." "I need to see the original file," I said. "The one from 11 years ago, the one my father signed when you two were still partners." George nodded. "I kept it in the floor safe, Alina. I always had a feeling this day would come. Your father is a good builder, but he never could see the rot in his own foundation." I didn't go into the office. I sat in Mr. Henderson's kitchen, the air smelling of stale toast and floor wax, and looked at a document my father had signed when I was barely 20. It was the original partnership agreement for his construction firm. He'd never read the clauses about asset distribution in the event of insolvency. He'd just signed where the X was. He always was a better builder than a businessman. Mr. Henderson said softly, sliding a glass of water toward me. He didn't want to see the numbers, Alina. He wanted to see the porch go up. I thanked him and left. I needed to think. I needed to plan. But my family wasn't done with their own plan. When I pulled back onto Maple Drive, I saw my mother's car was gone, but the front door was wide open. A heavy, hollow thud echoed from inside, the sound of something wooden hitting a wall. I ran inside. Mom, Dad! The house was a construction zone. Chloe was standing in the middle of the master suite, her phone propped up on my dresser. She was wearing a designer dust mask and holding a pry bar. Half of the plush cream carpet I'd paid $3,000 for 2 years ago had been ripped up, exposing the plywood subfloor. My clothes, my professional blazers, my silk blouses, my winter coats were gone. The closet was empty. "What are you doing?" I screamed, my voice cracked. "I have 30 days, you can't just destroy my room while I'm at work." Chloe pulled down her mask and rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop. Mom said you were being difficult and that we needed to accelerate the timeline. Since you're leaving anyway, we figured we'd get a head start on the studio. Your stuff is in the garage. I didn't want the dust to ruin your, whatever those are, Target specials." I spun around and ran to the garage. The door was heavy, the spring groaning. When I threw it open, I felt the first bite of the October air. My life was in the middle of the concrete floor. My bed frame had been dismantled and leaned against the lawnmower. My mattress was propped up near the oily spot where my father parks his truck. My clothes hadn't been packed. They'd been dumped into blue plastic bins, some of them spilling onto the dusty floor. My laptop charger was tangled around my dog's leash. And then I saw the door to the house. The handle was gone. In its place was a shiny, new deadbolt, a keyless entry pad. I reached out and tried the handle of the interior door. It didn't budge. "Dad," I shouted, pounding on the wood. "Dad, open the door." I heard his heavy footsteps on the other side. He didn't open it. He spoke through the wood, his voice muffled and flat. "Your mother is right, Alina. You're making this too hard. You keep bringing up money and fees like we're your employees. It's making everyone uncomfortable. Just sleep out there for the next 30 days. It's a finished garage. It's got insulation. Don't make a scene. Let your sister have the room so we can have some peace." "It's 40 degrees out here, Dad," I yelled. "And my dog, where is Cooper?" "He's out there with you," my father said. "Chloe said he was shedding on the new subfloor. Just stay out there, Alina. We'll bring you some dinner later." I heard him walk away. The house went silent, except for the distant, muffled sound of Chloe's upbeat vlog music playing from the master suite. I sat down on one of the blue plastic bins. Cooper, my golden retriever mix, crept out from behind my mattress, his tail between his legs. He licked my hand, his tongue warm against my freezing skin. The garage was finished, sure, but it wasn't heated. The draft coming under the big bay door was sharp and smelled like wet leaves. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I went to the county property portal, something I check once a quarter just to be sure the tax liens are clear. I logged in. I searched 412 Maple Drive. The owner of record line didn't say the LLC name anymore. My heart stopped. It didn't say my name either. Transfer date, October 12th. Document type, quitclaim deed. Grantor, my LLC name, grantee. Margaret Ann Miller, my mother. I opened the digital copy of the filing. It cost me $5 to download the PDF. There, at the bottom of the second page, was a signature. It looked like mine. The loopy E, the sharp N, the way I always cross my T's high. It was a near-perfect imitation. She had forged a deed. She had found the LLC name from the tax bills, looked up the authorized signer, me, and faked a transfer of the entire property to herself. She hadn't just evicted me, she had stolen the ground I was standing on. I looked at Cooper. I looked at the deadbolt on the door that led back into the house I owned. I didn't know yet what she'd done that morning, I whispered to the empty garage. But I knew what I was going to do now. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I opened my laptop, tethered it to my phone's hotspot, and began downloading the last 4 years of mortgage statements from the hidden LLC account. If they wanted me to be a guest, I was going to be the most expensive guest they ever had. I spent the first night in the garage shivering under a pile of my own winter coats. I didn't set up the bed frame. I just dragged the mattress onto the concrete and pulled Cooper close to me. The floor was an ice block that sucked the warmth right out of my bones. Every few hours, I'd hear the floorboards groan above me. I'd hear the sharp, rhythmic thud-thud-thud of a hammer as Chloe and my father began transforming my room. They didn't care that I was down there. To them, the garage was a storage unit, and I was just another box they hadn't gotten around to throwing away yet. This was the bottom. I was a 31-year-old woman with a professional degree and a healthy bank account, and I was sleeping next to a lawnmower because I had tried to be a good daughter. I had spent 4 years protecting my father's ego, only for him to lock the door and tell me to stay in the cold. At 3:00 a.m., I reached out and touched the cold metal of the garage door track. I realized then that I wasn't mourning the room. I was mourning the version of my parents I'd invented, the ones I thought were worth saving. The sun hadn't even come up when I heard a soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the small, high window that looked out onto the side yard. I stood up, my joints stiff and aching, and peered through the glass. Mr. Henderson was standing there in a heavy flannel coat, holding a thermos and a paper bag. I slid the side door open just a crack. "Elena," he whispered. "I saw the lights go out in the main house, but I saw your flashlight moving in here. I figured they'd done something foolish." He handed me the thermos. When I opened it, the steam smelled like high-quality coffee and real cream. He held out the bag, 2 warm blueberry muffins from the bakery in town. "I can't stay," he said, his eyes scanning the dark windows of my parents' house with a look of pure disgust. "But you listen to me. You know you hold the deed, right? You're an accountant, you deal in facts. The fact is that house is yours. Stop playing their game, Elena. It's time to be the landlord." He squeezed my hand once and disappeared back into the shadows toward his own fence. I sat back down on my blue bin and drank the coffee. It was the first time in 24 hours I felt like a human being instead of a nuisance. He was right. I was an accountant. I didn't do emotions well, but I did audits perfectly. I opened my laptop. The battery was at 20%, but that was enough. I pulled up the LLC operating agreement, the one I'd drafted with a lawyer 4 years ago. Then I opened the PDF of the forged quitclaim deed my mother had filed. I zoomed in on the signature. I looked at the notary stamp. The notary was a woman named Sheila Vance. I recognized the name. She was one of my mother's bridge partners. My mother hadn't just faked my name. She'd roped a friend into committing a felony. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. I downloaded a certified copy of the forged deed and a copy of my actual incorporation papers. I saved them to 3 different cloud drives and a physical thumb drive I kept on my keychain. "Cooper," I whispered, rubbing the dog's ears. "We aren't staying here for 30 days. I hadn't checked my phone yet, but when I did, I saw a notification from the family group chat. My mother had posted a photo of the master suite. My beautiful navy blue walls were already covered in a thick, wet coat of sunset terracotta primer. So happy to finally have the space for Chloe to shine. Sunrise Sparkles New Beginnings # family first homeowner life. I closed the laptop. My plan wasn't just to get the house back. My plan was to make sure they never forgot whose house it actually was. I didn't stay in the garage to watch the sun come up. By 7:30 a.m., I was in a hotel lobby downtown, using their business center to print the forged deed. By noon, the lie had already grown legs and started running. It started with a Facebook notification. My mother had posted a photo of the housewarming party invitation, a digital card with gold foil lettering. Celebrating Chloe's new creative studio and home, Saturday at 6 p.m., finally reclaiming our space and supporting our daughter's dreams. Out with the old, in with the new. The comments were a bloodbath of polite cruelty. My Aunt Sarah wrote, "So glad you're finally putting your foot down, Margaret. It's hard when they just won't leave the nest." A neighbor replied, "We saw Alina parking on the street. It's about time she learned some independence." The social contagion was moving fast. By the time I walked into my Aunt Linda's 35th anniversary brunch 2 days later, the air in the room had already curdled. I didn't want to go, but Linda had been the only one who sent me a birthday card last year. I walked into the private room of the bistro, the smell of hollandaise and mimosas thick enough to choke on. The chatter stopped mid-sentence. My Aunt Linda didn't greet me with a hug. She stood in front of the buffet table, her plate held like a shield. "Oh, Alina," she said, her voice dripping with that performative pity that's worse than an insult. "Are you sure you can afford to be here? Your mother told us about the financial situation. Since you're losing your housing, maybe you should be saving your pennies instead of eating brunch." "I'm not losing my housing, Aunt Linda," I said, my voice flat. "I'm being evicted from a house I pay for." "That's not what the deed says," Chloe chimed in. She was sitting at the head of the long table next to my mother. She was wearing a new white sundress and holding a glass of champagne. She pulled up her phone and showed a group of cousins a photo of the sunset terracotta room. "Mom showed us the paperwork. It's her house. Alina just got confused about her status there. It's sad, really." My mother didn't say a word. She just sipped her tea and nodded toward an empty chair at the very end of the table, shoved against the service door where the waiters came in and out. "Sit down, Alina," my mother said. "Don't make a scene at Linda's party. Just eat your eggs and be grateful we're still willing to be seen with you after the way you've behaved." I looked around the room. I saw my cousins looking away. I saw my father staring intensely at his fruit cup, refusing to acknowledge the daughter who had saved his credit score 4 years ago. The room had already accepted the script. In their eyes, I was the squatter, the failure, the scratched label. "I won't be staying," I said. "But Mom, I'd double-check that paperwork if I were you. Forgeries have a way of coming back to haunt people." The room went deathly silent. My mother's hand didn't shake, but her jaw tightened. "Leave, Alina, now." I walked out, the swinging service door hitting my shoulder on the way. I wasn't crying. I was counting. 1 forged signature. 1 fraudulent notary. 100 guests invited to a party in a house they didn't realize was a crime scene. I didn't know yet that the caterers had already been booked with my mother's new credit card, the one she'd opened using the house as collateral. I didn't go back to the garage. I spent 3 hours in my car in a grocery store parking lot, watching the rain streak across the windshield until my breathing finally slowed down. By 2:00 p.m., I was sitting in Mr. Henderson's kitchen again. He didn't ask me how the brunch went. He just looked at my face, pushed a plate of sliced apples toward me, and picked up his landline. "My daughter is a shark, Alina," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I raised her to be a builder, but she preferred tearing down bad contracts. She's been waiting for a case like this since she passed the bar." 40 minutes later, I was driving toward the city's financial district. The office was on the 42nd floor, all glass and polished steel that made the clouds look like they were part of the furniture. When the elevator doors opened, a receptionist in a crisp navy blazer stood up. "Ms. Miller, Sarah Henderson is expecting you." I was led into an office that overlooked the river. Sarah Henderson didn't look like her father. She was sharp-edged, wearing a charcoal suit and glasses that caught the light like tiny mirrors. She didn't offer me a seat. She stood by the window and waited for me to set my folder on her desk. My father says you're an accountant who's been playing secret benefactor for 4 years, Sarah said, her voice like a velvet snap. He also says your mother just filed a quitclaim deed with your signature on it. She did, I said. I pulled out the certified copy and the LLC's original incorporation papers. I didn't sign it. I wasn't even in the county on the day it was notarized. I have the EZ Pass records and a time-stamped receipt from a coffee shop 3 towns over. Sarah picked up the document. She didn't just read it, she dissected it. She ran her thumb over the notary's stamp, the stamp belonging to Sheila Vance, my mother's bridge partner. "This is sloppy," Sarah whispered. It wasn't an insult, it was a professional assessment. "The notary commission number is expired by 2 months. Your mother didn't just forge your name, Alina. She used a friend whose credentials were already dead. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. This is felony fraud and tampering with public records." She sat down then, finally gesturing for me to do the same. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a porcelain cup. She poured tea from a heavy iron pot, real tea, dark and smelling of earth. "Ma'am," she said, and the word hit me like a physical weight. Nobody had called me that in months. To my family, I was the girl in the garage. To Sarah Henderson, I was a property owner. "Here is what is going to happen," Sarah said. "We aren't going to ask them to leave. We are going to notify them that they are currently occupying a property under a fraudulent title. I'm drafting a cease and desist for the studio construction immediately. If they hammer one more nail into that subfloor, it's destruction of property." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "But the real leverage is the deed. If I take this to the district attorney, your mother goes to jail. Not probation jail. Real jail. She's used this forged title to secure a new line of credit, hasn't she?" "She mentioned a new contact," I said. "And she's booking caterers for a party this Saturday." Sarah smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just seen the cage door left open. "Perfect. She's committing bank fraud on top of everything else. We have backup now, Alina, but we aren't going to stop the party. We're going to let her host it. We're going to let her stand in front of everyone she knows and claim ownership of something she stole." I felt a warmth spread through my chest, not the frantic heat of anger, but the steady, glowing coal of power. For years, I had shrunk myself to fit into the corners of their lives. I had been the silent foundation, holding up a house that didn't want me. "I have one condition," I said, setting the teacup down. Sarah tilted her head. "What's that?" "I want the sheriff there," I said, "but I want them to wait until she starts the toast." Sarah's smile widened. She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her and started writing. "I like the way you think, Alina. It's very calculated." I left her office an hour later. My phone buzzed in the elevator. It was a text from my mother. "If you don't clean your junk out of the garage before the party, I'm calling animal control on your dog. He's been barking and it's upsetting Chloe's aesthetic for her moving in vlog. Be a grown-up for once and handle your responsibilities." I looked at the text and didn't feel the usual spike of panic. I didn't feel the need to apologize or explain. I just typed 3 words and hit send. "I'll be there." I didn't tell her which version of me was coming. I didn't go back to the garage to sleep. I spent the next 48 hours in a cheap motel room that smelled of industrial lemon cleaner, my laptop humming on the laminate desk as I coordinated with Sarah Henderson. We weren't just reacting anymore, we were building a cage. Sarah sent me a digital file on Thursday afternoon. It was the confirmation from the county clerk's office. They had flagged the deed for an administrative review after Sarah filed a formal notice of contest. The leverage wasn't just a theory, it was a physical document with a red pending stamp across the digital preview. "The bank freeze is the killing blow," Sarah told me over the phone. Her voice was crisp, the sound of a woman who enjoyed the sound of a closing trap. Your mother used that forged deed to apply for a $50,000 home equity line of credit. They fast-tracked it because of her excellent credit history, which ironically is excellent because you've been paying the mortgage for 4 years. The funds were dispersed into a new account yesterday. Did she spend it? I asked. She spent $8,000 on the caterer, the floral arrangements, and a consultation fee for Chloe's new branding agent, Sarah said. But the bank just flagged the account for suspicious activity because of our filing. As of 2:00 p.m. today, that account is frozen. The check she wrote to the catering company, it's going to bounce like a rubber ball. I felt a cold shiver of relief. It was strategic, not reactive. For years, I had been the one making sure the checks didn't bounce. I had been the one watching the ledger to ensure my father's mistakes didn't end with a sheriff at the door. Now, I was the one withdrawing the safety net. I moved fast. I didn't want to give them time to pivot. I called the utility companies, the electric, the water, the gas. All the accounts were in my name under the LLC. I didn't cut them off immediately. I scheduled the shutoff for 8:00 p.m. on Saturday, right in the middle of the party. "Are you sure about the timing?" Sarah asked. "It's aggressive." "They wanted to show the world their new beginning," I said, looking at a photo Chloe had just posted of a $1,000 floral arch being installed in the entryway I paid the taxes on. "I'm just making sure the lighting matches the reality of the situation." I also arranged for a moving crew, not for me. I sent them the address for a local storage facility and paid for 2 months in advance. I wasn't going to be cruel enough to throw their clothes in the street, but I wasn't going to let them stay in my house for one more night after the truth came out. The final piece was the sheriff's department. Because of the felony fraud aspect, Sarah had coordinated with a deputy she knew. They wouldn't be there to evict in the civil sense. That takes months. They would be there to investigate a reported crime in progress, the unauthorized occupation of a property under a fraudulent title, and the use of a forged document to secure bank funds. I sat in the motel room and looked at the jewelry box on the bed. It was a small, velvet-lined case that used to hold my grandmother's pearls. Now, it held 3 things: a certified copy of the original LLC incorporation, the authentic deed, and the 24-hour vacate order drafted by Sarah's office. My mother had spent the week telling the neighborhood I was a squatter. She had spent the week telling my sister that the master suite was her new kingdom. I didn't let this become a long procedural summary in my head. I didn't care about the how anymore. I cared about the when. I received a notification on my phone, a Ring camera alert from the front porch. I pulled up the feed. It was my sister, Chloe. She was standing on the porch with 2 of her friends, holding a bottle of expensive champagne. She was laughing, pointing at the new smart lock my father had installed to keep me out. "And then," Chloe said, her voice clear through the tiny speaker, "we're going to turn the garage into a gym. Elena left all her accountant stuff in there, but Dad says we can just haul it to the dump on Monday. It's finally a real influencer house." I watched her blow a kiss to my camera, which she didn't realize was still synced to my phone. I didn't know yet what she'd done that morning. I whispered to the empty motel room, echoing the lie she'd told her followers. But I knew exactly what she'd be doing by Saturday night. The leverage was confirmed. The fuse was lit. All I had to do was show up for the show. I sat in my car at the end of the block, watching the delivery trucks arrive. It was Friday, the day before the party. The air was crisp, the kind of clear October afternoon that makes everything look sharper, more permanent. I watched 2 men in black polos unload 3 massive crates of white hydrangeas and eucalyptus. They carried them through the front door, my front door, where Chloe stood, directing them with the grand, sweeping gestures of someone who had never actually labored for the space she was standing in. The house looked beautiful. My mother had spent thousands of my secret mortgage equity on new outdoor lighting that washed the brick in a soft, expensive amber. She had hired a crew to power wash the driveway I'd been banned from using. I saw my father come out to the porch. He was carrying a ladder. He looked older than he had a week ago, his shoulders hunched under his flannel shirt. He began hanging a string of Edison bulbs across the eaves. I watched him struggle with a clip, his hands shaking slightly. For a second, a flicker of the old Alina, the one who would have jumped out of the car to hold the ladder for him, started to move. Then I remembered the sound of the deadbolt clicking shut while I stood in the freezing garage. I remembered him telling me not to make a scene while my sister tore up my carpet. I stayed in the car. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from a local community group. My mother had posted there, too. So proud to be hosting a community open house tomorrow night. After years of struggle, we've finally secured our family estate. Come see the new Chloe Miller Creative Studio. Proof that hard work and family loyalty always win in the end. She was building the legend in real time. She was so confident in the forgery, so sure of the silence I'd maintained for years, that she was inviting the entire town to witness her triumph. She thought my silence was weakness. She didn't realize it was just data collection. I drove to the utility substation at 4:00 p.m. I had a physical meeting with a supervisor there to confirm the shutoff. "Everything is set, Ms. Miller," the woman said, looking at the LLC documents Sarah Henderson had helped me prepare. "The main breaker and the water main for 412 Maple will be remotely deactivated at 8:05 p.m. tomorrow. Since the accounts are being closed due to fraudulent occupancy, there won't be a grace period for reconnection." "Thank you," I said. I spent the evening in my motel room, folding my clothes into a neat suitcase. I had already moved my mattress and my most important files into a small rental unit across town. Only the junk remained in the garage, the broken bed frame, the empty bins, the things they intended to throw away. I pulled up Chloe's Instagram story. She was doing a room reveal teaser. The terracotta paint was finished. She had moved in a white Bouclé chair and a gold-rimmed desk. "I literally can't believe this is finally my space," she whispered to the camera, her eyes welling with performative tears. "It feels so, earned." I checked the countdown clock I'd set on my laptop. 24 hours. My mother sent one final text at 9:00 p.m. "Alina, I'm leaving the garage side door unlocked tomorrow so you can come in and help the caterers. You'll be wearing a black dress and a white apron. You'll stay in the kitchen and keep the glasses full. If you do this without a sour face, I might give you an extra week to find a room at the shelter. Don't be late." She wasn't just taking my house. She wanted to turn me into the help at the celebration of my own displacement. She wanted the final humiliation to be public, to show everyone that I was exactly what she said I was, a failure who was lucky to be there at all. I didn't reply. I just looked at the velvet jewelry box sitting on the nightstand. I wasn't going to be the help. I was going to be the auditor, and the audit was finally due. The party didn't start until 6, but the house was breathing by 4. I sat in my car at the edge of the cul-de-sac, watching the transformation. My mother had rented a white marquee for the back lawn. Strings of warm bistro lights crisscrossed the yard, turning the space where I used to play with Cooper into a high-end venue. I waited until exactly 6:45 p.m. I wanted the room full. I wanted the champagne to be on its second round and the social armor to be thin. I parked my car in the middle of the street, blocking half the driveway. I didn't care about the neighbors anymore. I walked toward the front door. I wasn't wearing the black dress and white apron my mother had demanded. I was wearing my sharpest charcoal power suit and heels that sounded like gunshots on the pavement. In my hand, I carried the velvet jewelry box. I didn't knock. I used my thumb to press the unlock button on my phone. The new smart lock my father had installed, the one synced to the Wi-Fi account in my name, obeyed me instantly. The deadbolt retracted with a heavy, satisfying thwack. I stepped inside. The house was humming with about 80 people. Neighbors, bridge club members, and my sister's influencer friends were packed into the living room. The air smelled of expensive lilies and shrimp cocktail. My mother was standing near the fireplace, holding a crystal flute. She was wearing a shimmering gold dress that screamed Lady of the Manor. Beside her, Chloe was beaming, her phone already out, filming a slow pan of the room. The chatter died down as I walked into the center of the rug. My mother's face went from triumphant to frozen in 3 seconds. "Elena," she said, her voice a sharp whisper that cut through the music. "You're late, and you're not dressed for the kitchen. Go to the garage and wait for me." "I don't think so, Margaret," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The room was already sliding into a vacuum of silence. "Elena, don't do this," my father said, stepping out from the dining room. He looked terrified. He knew. Deep down in the part of him that still understood blueprints and foundations, he knew the house was built on a lie. "Do what, Dad? Attend a party in my own house?" I turned to the room. "Can I have everyone's attention for a moment? My mother has a very important announcement to make, and I want to make sure she has the proper documentation to back it up." I walked over to my mother and handed her the velvet box. She stared at it like it contained a bomb. "Open it, Mom," I said. "Show everyone the deed you're so proud of, the one you told Aunt Linda gave you the right to throw me into a freezing garage." "Elena, you're being hysterical," Chloe chirped, stepping forward with her camera. "Stop trying to ruin my moment. This is my studio launch, just leave." "I'm not the one leaving, Chloe," I said. My mother opened the box. She expected a scene, maybe a crying plea. Instead, she found the certified copy of her forged deed, the one with the red void stamp across it from Sarah Henderson's office, and the 24-hour vacate order. As she pulled the papers out, the front door opened again. Sarah Henderson walked in, followed by 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies. The sight of the brown uniforms and the heavy utility belts sent a ripple of genuine panic through the crowd. People started setting their drinks down on my mahogany tables. "Margaret Miller," the lead deputy asked, his voice booming in the high-ceilinged foyer. "We're here regarding a report of felony document fraud and unauthorized entry." "This is a mistake," my mother shrieked, her gold dress shimmering as she shook. "I have the deed. I filed it myself. Elena is just a bitter tenant." She shoved the forged paper toward the deputy. It was the exact move Sarah had predicted. My mother was so blinded by her own narrative that she handed the officer the physical proof of her crime. The deputy looked at the paper, then at the certified, pending fraud investigation, notice Sarah handed him. He looked back at my mother. "Ma'am, the notary on this document has an expired commission, and the owner of the LLC has filed a sworn affidavit that this signature is a forgery. You've also used this fraudulent title to secure a bank loan. That's a felony." The room wasn't just quiet, it was breathless. I saw Aunt Linda in the corner, her hand over her mouth. I saw Chloe's friends slowly lowering their phones, the content suddenly turning into a crime documentary they didn't want to be featured in. "Dad," I said, looking at my father. Did you know she forged my name to steal the house I bought to save you from bankruptcy?" My father looked at me, then at the deputies, then at the woman in the gold dress who had spent 40 years steering his life into a ditch. He dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the hardwood, a spray of glass and bubbles. "I told you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I told you we shouldn't have signed that paper, Margaret. I'm not going to jail for you. I'm not doing it." The defection was a physical blow. My mother recoiled as if he'd slapped her. "You coward!" she screamed at him. "I did this for us, for Chloe, so she could have a future." "By stealing mine?" I asked. The deputy stepped forward. "Margaret Miller, I need you to step away from the guests. We're going to need to discuss these documents at the station." "Wait," Chloe cried out, her voice high and desperate. "What about the party? What about my studio? The caterers are bringing the main course." As if on cue, the clock on the wall struck 8:05. The lights didn't just flicker, they vanished. The soft amber glow, the bistro lights, the sunset terracotta highlights, everything went black. The hum of the refrigerator died. The music cut out mid-note. In the sudden, heavy darkness, only the flashlights of the deputies cut through the room. "The utilities are in my name," I said into the dark. "And since the house is currently a crime scene, I've decided to close the accounts. I suggest everyone find their coats. The moving trucks will be here at 8:00 a.m. to clear out the studio." The sound of 80 people trying to find the exit in the dark was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. Guests were stumbling, murmuring, the social contagion of the lie finally breaking. I stood by the door, a silhouette in the moonlight, as the people who had looked down on me at brunch scrambled to get away from the woman in the gold dress. My sister's friends practically sprinted to their cars. Aunt Linda walked past me without making eye contact, her face pale. By the time the deputies led my mother out to the cruiser, the family estate was just a dark, cold shell of a house. I stood on the porch and watched the red and blue lights fade down the street. My father was sitting on the front step, his head in his hands. Chloe was inside, sobbing in the dark, her creative studio, nothing but a room full of expensive furniture she couldn't afford and a debt she couldn't pay. "Someone has to watch the dog," I said to the back of my father's head. He didn't look up. He just sat there on the steps of a house he no longer even pretended to own. I didn't go back into the house that night. I slept in my car, parked in the driveway I'd finally reclaimed, watching the shadows of the neighbors' houses flicker out as they went to bed. For the first time in years, the silence of Maple Drive didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a clean slate. The fallout was swift and mechanical, exactly the way I wanted it. My mother was charged with felony identity theft and forgery. Because of the bank fraud, she didn't get a quiet slap on the wrist. She spent 3 nights in a holding cell before Aunt Sarah, the same aunt who had stepped in front of the buffet table at brunch, refused to post her bail. It turns out, my mother had borrowed $5,000 from Sarah, too, promising it was for a family investment. My father filed for divorce 2 weeks later. He told the lawyer it was about the forgery, but I think it was really about the shame. He couldn't look at the house anymore. He moved into a cramped 1-bedroom apartment near the train tracks. He calls me sometimes, his voice thin and hesitant, asking how the dog is doing. I answer, but I don't invite him over. You can't rebuild a foundation with someone who watched the walls being torn down and said nothing. As for Chloe, her influencer career didn't just tank, it imploded. One of her friends had kept their phone recording during the blackout. The video of our mother being led away in handcuffs while Chloe sobbed about her terracotta aesthetic went viral for all the wrong reasons. She's currently working at a boutique downtown, folding the linen sets she used to buy on my dime. She lives with a colleague in a studio apartment that is exactly the size of the garage she tried to lock me in. I spent the next month stripping the sunset terracotta off the walls. I hired a professional crew to pull up the cheap laminate Chloe had started installing and replaced it with wide plank oak. I turned that room into a sunlit home office with a desk that faces the window. Warmth beat last Saturday. I hosted a barbecue. It wasn't a housewarming party for 100 strangers. It was just me, Sarah Henderson, and her father, George. George was at the grill, complaining about the price of charcoal, while Sarah sat on the porch swing reading a brief. Cooper was sprawled out on the new patio stones, his belly to the sun, finally asleep without one ear cocked for the sound of a closing door. We ate burgers on paper plates and drank lemonade. Nobody filmed it. Nobody gave a toast about estates or legacies. We just sat in the quiet. I still have the pink eviction notice. I framed it. It's small, neon pink, and tucked away in the back of my desk drawer. I keep it not as a trophy of revenge, but as a reminder of what it costs to be a good daughter in a system that only wants you to be a sacrifice. The house is smaller now that it's just me and the dog. It's quieter. There are no expensive candles, no aesthetic vlogs, and no red envelopes hidden in the recycling. I walked out onto the porch this evening to watch the sunset. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my keys, and felt the weight of them in my palm. I stepped inside and pulled the door shut. I turned the deadbolt myself. It's my hand on the lock. It's my name on the deed. It's my home. If your family tried to evict you from the house you bought to save them, would you have let them keep their pride or called the police? Let me know in the comments. There's a story in the description about a woman whose husband tried to secretly sell her grandmother's wedding ring to fund his crypto wallet. Trust me, you'll want to hear how she got it back.